So a lot of people think they have stage fright. There is a tiny minority of people that have genuine stage fright. Like if they walked up on a stage and they just had to stand there, they would be nervous. There are some people. I'm saying you don't even have to speak. Like if someone's like, you walk up here and stand in this line, some people would be nervous. There are people who are nervous to have a one-on-one conversation, and those people are going to be nervous speaking. But most people who think they have stage fright have just never learned how to set themselves up to write a great talk. So when people walk up on stage to deliver a talk at a conference, board meeting, whatever, I think maybe one other exception, if you're like doing a pitch and there's millions of dollars on the line, that's also going to come with a certain amount of anxiety. But most of the presentations that we do that we get so nervous about, in reality, the stakes are not that high.
Welcome to the Product Tea with Leah. I am your host, Leah Darin, and we are about to spill the tea with the best from tech about product growth and senior leadership topics. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the guy who's got more LinkedIn followers than most of us have business cards. 25,000. He is not just a talk coach, he is a PowerPoint ninja, a one-liner wizard, and the only human who can make frameworks and acronyms sound like a superpower. Today, he's here to roast our talks, to rebuild them from scratch, and maybe, just maybe, teach us how to stop boring people when you are on stage and something is on the line. Spoiler alert, his $200 talk tune-up might be the best therapy your career ever had. And from Google stages to TEDx crowds to audiences crying in a good way, his clients don't just speak, they conquer. So grab a snack, hide your filler words, and let's dive into how to turn your next presentation from meh to mic drop. Vincent Pierri, good morning. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Great to meet you. Or great not to meet you, to see you. I've met you before. I got thrown off. You said morning. It is not morning. You always say good morning, no matter what time of day it is?
That is true. Yeah, I do that in boards. I do that in companies. I do that everywhere. It's kind of like my thing. Yeah.
So funny.
Well, it is very nice to see you, Vincent. You have been on this podcast already.
Yeah.
Interviewing me, but now I think you're more prominent than me now. I think you have surpassed Michael Jordan in LinkedIn fame, or Snoop Dogg. I think Snoop Dogg is also on LinkedIn. But in any case,
yeah,
it's very nice to see you again. We've recorded an episode about a year ago, which was also about stage speaking. And I was the person who was being interviewed on like how to do that. And now I get to ask you. So that is great. Was this introduction a complete and correct description of your personality and career?
It was perfect. Perfect.
Thank you.
Was there any AI in there? Or did you just bang that whole thing out right now?
No, so you can always say that. So about 60% of this was AI.
Yep.
Because you can usually say, like, when AI is writing something, it includes the word wizard. I don't know why, it's just a thing that it does. And I felt like it was so over the top that I just left it in. So in that case, it's kind of fine. Vincent, what do people get wrong about you once they get to know you?
Well, that's a good question. That's the one question I was supposed to prepare to answer over the last 5 minutes. And I completely spaced out and didn't even think about it. But we've talked about this a little bit before, but a lot of people, probably the vast majority of my clients who work with me, do not know that I'm not from tech. I do not have a tech background. I'm actually a full-time pastor of a church. I've talked about it a little bit more lately, but most people still do not know. So yeah, that's the whole, and we could talk maybe more about this later if it makes sense. But that was what got me started on the speaking thing, was having to do it every single week, write a different talk every week and deliver it to the same people. So it's a real public speaking grind.
Well, that's fascinating. I mean, there's two groups in the world. One of them that believes into a higher deity, and then there's also the religious people like you. And the first group is the ones in tech, right? Because they believe in Elon Musk or something else. So caught you on the left field with this one. Okay. But in any case, it's very nice to have you. So I sometimes have clients as well that have to give important presentations. So can you maybe touch on a little bit, like, do you feel like there's a big difference in terms of to whom you speak if you're, let's say, you go on a stage or you have to go in front of a board, or like whether it's an all hands meeting of like 150 people and, one of these super CEOs or like C-levels just doesn't know how to speak? Like, how do you kind of reconcile this? Like, what is your job? I think you're trying to coach people as well, like to give one good, important speech, but it's not about like becoming a fake influencer like us two, right?
Yeah, it's all very focused on speaking. I actually do a little LinkedIn coaching now and then, but my main thing is speaking coaching, and my main clients are people who are speaking at maybe like their first big conference. So that is the main kind of coaching I do. When people go through some of the process that I take them through, they end up applying most of the frameworks to most of their speaking. So it all ends up bleeding into internal presentations, stakeholder presentations, pitches, all that sort of thing. So I use the frameworks that I teach, I use for my own when I'm speaking to a large group. I use the exact same frameworks if I have to give a presentation to my board, staff meeting, training. It's all the same frameworks all the time.
So let's say we're dealing with this entire situation in the sense of like, hey, there's something important coming up. So how do you approach this? Like, let's say, how do you start with this? Is this about getting over your fear, or is this about like, hey, here's how you structure this thing, and then we kind of practice together and how you're going to ace it? Like, help me a little bit on how like to get started. Like, let's say I had no clue in how to structure this. I also have a very guerrilla version of my own stuff, right? Like how I prepare. You maybe remember that I don't do speaking notes at all, for instance. But how do you try to work this out with someone that might be not that comfortable in front of a bigger audience?
Yeah, totally. I have watched at least a couple of your talks. You're a great communicator. I love watching them, 100%. And there might be some of the things we talk about today that you may end up considering and go, okay, that kind of makes sense, or that kind of is helpful. So here are some of my core. You like that one, didn't you? You're like, okay.
I'm like, did he just say that I'm not perfect? Or like, what was he saying there? No, go ahead.
Yeah, so here are some of my like core POV things on speaking. So first of all, I don't think that as a general category, stage fright really exists.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people think they have stage fright. There is a tiny minority of people that have genuine stage fright. Like if they walked up on a stage and they just had to stand there, they would be nervous. There are some people. I'm saying you didn't even have to speak. Like if someone's like, you walk up here and stand in this line, some people would be nervous. There are people who are nervous to have a one-on-one conversation, and those people are going to be nervous speaking. But most people who think they have stage fright have just never learned how to set themselves up to write a great talk. So when people walk up on stage to deliver a talk at a conference, board meeting, whatever, I think maybe one other exception, if you're like doing a pitch and there's millions of dollars on the line, that's also going to come with a certain amount of anxiety. But most of the presentations that we do that we get so nervous about, in reality, the stakes are not that high. The reason we're nervous is not to be on stage speaking. It is generally two things. One is that you're going to forget what comes next, right? You've written the talk, you've got 100 slides or even 20 slides, and you can't remember what comes next in your own talk. And you think you have stage fright, but what you really have is anxiety to forget what you're going to say next in front of a bunch of people. Like some of my background is I was a musician. I toured with different bands, did that whole thing for a while. I had zero anxiety to be on stage performing music, unless if I did not know how to play one of the songs, which never really happened, but in theory it could, right? If I got up on stage in front of several hundred people or 1,000 people or 2,000, whatever, and I'm like, I have to play this song and I can't remember how it goes, I would be panicking. That's not stage fright. That's forgetting how the song goes. Most speakers get up on stage not knowing how their own song goes. They don't know how their own talk flows, and they go, oh my goodness, I'm so nervous to be on stage. I'm like, you are not nervous to be on stage. You just did not do the work to even figure out how the internal logic of your talk flows well enough to get through it. Like most speakers, I don't know if this is you or not, Leah, but most speakers, if the deck died, if the projection system died, they would just walk off stage and go, thanks anyways, because they can't remember what they're going to say. And if you can't remember what you're going to say, you are going to be terrified. That's not stage fright. That's just not knowing how to write a talk that's easy for you to remember. That is one of two secret sources of stage fright. Before I go to the second one, thoughts on that? Does that make sense to you?
It does to some degree, for sure. And I think I agree with that this is a big insecurity that you can actually actively do something about. And that is totally within your control, which is like to put the work in. I'm quite unstructured in how fast I do my talks. So, to the complete panic and utter desolation of most people who are inviting me on stage, I usually finish my talks about 15 minutes before I go on stage, or 30 minutes before, like or a couple of hours, right? Even though they told me that I have to hand it in 2 weeks before. But I want to say to this just really quickly that I'm timing all my speeches, right? Like I don't do speaker notes, but I practice them. I know exactly what comes when, which jokes are kind of landing and so forth. And I usually can talk about it also without the slides. But this is just because I've been actually talking them through 8 to 9 times. It's not enough to just like look at your slides and be like, oh yeah, I think I got that section. No, speak it, record it, for instance, with the time and so forth. So I do think there's another element also to stage fright that you cannot combat with this. But I think just as far as this point so far, yes, this is within your control. And as with the music, this is just like you did not practice enough. That's what that is. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And some of the remembering how your talk goes can be solved by practicing it more. But some of it is also writing the talk in a way that is easy to remember.
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk more about that later if you want. The other big source of stage fright, let's say you've learned how to write a talk that you can remember how the steps fit together. The other big problem, it's really three things. The second one is not knowing if the ideas themselves are going to land in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Like so many of my clients, they'll have a talk, maybe they've done it before, they got to do it again, or they got to do it on a bigger stage. But a lot of them have never done it at all, regardless of what led them to that moment. A lot of them are like, this is what I'm going to say. And I'm like, how do you feel about it? And they're like, I'm so nervous. And I'm like, why? They're like, I don't know if it's going to sound cliche. I don't know if it's really going to help people. I don't know if they already know this or if this is too far beyond their knowledge ability. And so I'm nervous about that. And again, people label this as stage fright. It's not stage fright. It's just, I don't know if this talk is going to be very valuable to anyone. And again, it is the same solution, not the exact same solution, but it's the same in the sense that it is solvable before you get on stage.
Okay. So how do we know whether a specific part of the talk works?
It does take a little bit of homework, but I mean, this is like so stupidly obvious. Maybe you already know where I'm going, but like talk to 3 people who are like in the sort of target ICP of that sort of event. They don't have to be literally the people who are going to attend, but generally you know somebody who would want to attend that sort of event, someone who fits the same career level, background, whatever, seniority, and you just show them, this is what I'm going to say, right?
No.
And if they all go, I know that, then you go, okay, well, I'm not going to say that then. So yeah, that's the other big piece.
I think this is also a very good tip in general. Like if you really want to kind of get past to this, and if you don't want to have like the entire talk, like, some people are also a little bit afraid of like, hey, Vincent, I want to kind of tell you my entire talk for 30 minutes, right? I think there's 2 ways that you can do this. Like if you have a conversation with someone like this, at least show the first 5 minutes and not show in terms of like, oh, like here's what I'm doing. Here I'm going to talk about this. Here I'm going to talk. No. Pretend like you're on stage right now. Shut up for 5 minutes. I'm going to just like do the beginning. The beginning is the most critical thing for you to kind of capture the audience. You don't want to capture them on minute 20. You want to capture them within minute 1 or 2. And then you can also say like, hey, you know what? This actually feels like a very good kind of introduction. And I think the other thing that I used to do, at least in the past a little bit until I got much more confident, was just to record myself. Record the entire talk. Do it on Veed or, like just like record yourself on a camera. And then you have the time. You can also see what actually works good and what does not work. Like you trust yourself by listening to yourself, but don't imagine yourself speaking.
Yeah, 100%. When you've got the right ideas and you've got a talk written in a way that's going to work and be easy for you to remember, then yes, when you're working on delivery, the very best thing you can do is record yourself, watch the video back and see how it feels, or do the beginning for somebody as well. The thing I was trying to highlight was just generally there's 3 or 4 insights you're bringing in that talk. Now, for someone like you are constantly testing your new insights on LinkedIn, with clients, with people you're consulting. So there is less room for doubt about like, is this going to land? But for a lot of people, they don't have the platform and they literally don't know if it's going to land, and they'll just try. They will discover whether or not the ideas are helpful on stage, right?
Mhm.
And that is the worst place to discover whether or not your ideas are going to help people is when you're telling them on stage. The last piece of like source of stage fright, right? So some of it is I can't remember how the talk goes. 2 is I don't know if the ideas are that helpful. And then 3 is it written in a way that it will actually be engaging. So like, do you cook at all, bake at all, anything like that?
I try to avoid baking because I feel like it's good for developing diabetes. But other than that, I cook a lot. Yeah.
What do you cook? What's one of your favorite meals?
I would say like some traditional Swiss stuff that is, like a specific type of bread or which would be baking again. So let's not mention that. But like something like a casserole or like specific pizzas or, something like that.
Great. You make the dough for the pizza?
Yeah.
Great. So like if you're making the pizza dough, there's ingredients, flour.
Yep.
What else? Butter.
There's flour, water. There's no butter. Come on. Like, what are you? Like, come on, Vincent.
No butter?
No, there's not. But like, what are you Americans doing? Like, what are you doing to the food? Olive oil. Okay.
Olive vinegar. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so we have flour, we have olive oil, we have water, we have a little bit of salt, and we have, I think it's called yeast in English. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. You have all these ingredients. These are all good ingredients.
Exactly.
But whether or not the dough tastes well, whether or not the pizza dough tastes good at the end of it matters very much how much of each ingredient you put in. And if you have way too much of one of them, you can all be good ingredients, but it does not come out tasting correctly. You know what I'm saying? So speaking works the same way. There is sort of a spectrum of ingredients from abstract to concrete. So at the high end of the spectrum, you have big concepts, new points of view, perspective shifts, that sort of thing. And then as you work down to the very bottom, at the very bottom, there's like tactics. Literally, here's like what you go do in your job or in your day-to-day life, action steps, call to action. In between, there are things that help ideas resonate on maybe an emotional or intuitive way. Storytelling, analogy. I'm not talking about like cheesy, like TED Talk storytelling. I'm saying like case study type thing. I'm not a big fan of TED Talks. We can talk about that later if you want, but analogies, Gary, right? You're Gary. Gary still gets brought up all the time. There's all these different ingredients, ideas, analogies, storytelling, concrete examples. Most speakers do not use that full spectrum. And if they do, they're almost always vastly out of proportion to what's engaging to an audience. So most speakers in the tech world especially spend all their time at the very top and the very bottom. So they'll say idea, 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 and then go all the way down here, explanation, here's how we do it. Idea, action step, idea, tactic, blah, 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 blah. No matter who you are, you can be Tony Robbins, you can be the greatest speaker of all time. If your talk is ideas and frameworks and tactics for 35 minutes, people are zoning out because our minds do not work that way that we can just hear idea, 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 idea. Now, here's the dangerous part. No matter who you are, if you have something valuable to say, 10% of the room will always come up to you afterwards and say, that was the greatest talk I've ever heard. Literally the best thing I've ever heard. And then there'll be 10% that just hate you no matter what. But the people that are actually in the middle will not tell you either way. So a lot of speakers get very stuck on doing things a certain way because they're like, I talked to 1,000 people and there was a line of 100 people who wanted to talk to me afterwards. And I'm like, that does not tell you anything in terms of how it landed with the whole room. So having the right percentages of each of those ingredients is what really helps it resonate. So 3 things. If it's clear in your own mind, so you're not worried about what comes next, if the ideas, you've pre-tested them and you know they're going to be high value, and then if you put the right ingredients in the right proportions, you walk on stage a different person because you go, this is going to be a banger. Every single part of this talk is straight fire. I cannot wait to deliver it. And then you go, oh my gosh, and I wasn't even nervous. Of course you weren't nervous because you wrote the best talk you've ever given. And now you can just go out there and be yourself.
Okay. So, what's funny? Like, I'm trying to sort this right now a little bit in my head because we should also talk about so you talk about the balance, right? So like, how would you do out of one thing and to kind of balance it correctly? Let's go back to this in a second and like how to figure out what is the correct balance.
Yep.
Because not everything can be done by feeling, because that's what I do, right? Like I can have also through a talk, I kind of know whether I'm overstretching a specific meme I sometimes also play with it when people are expecting Gary again. And when it's starting to become like a little bit weird, I just do a switcheroo on them and then just introduce something completely different and so forth. But if you don't have a really good feeling for this, there needs to be also like you need to have a framework.
Yep.
But just we'll go back to this in a second. Interestingly, I feel like you're getting really constructive, good criticism from people only when you have a really, 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 really good talk. So the best talk that I've ever given, I would say, has been in March at MTPCon. That's one that I'm proud of in the sense, like the delivery was clean, like the staff was absolutely amazing. Like the recording came out nice. It was really good. And then one of the production guys, like a very, very senior TV producer, he told me that you need to pay more attention to this difference that you have between people who are in the audience right now with you, like in the arena, and then those that are engaging with you on the screen afterwards. You were walking around so much that it was very difficult for people online to follow, but it was very engaging for those inside of the arena. So the camera dude was constantly like busy, like following me like left and right. He almost lost me out of the frame and all that kind of stuff. And this was extremely helpful feedback because he meant it also in that way, but he was trying to critique me on the highest level because at the same time he also said like, hey, this was a really, really good talk. I'm not even from this particular industry and I thought it was quite engaging. And this gave me so much because I was like, look, here's this dude that is not from tech. He found it interesting and now he's giving me this really valuable perspective in a way that I've never thought about it.
Yeah.
That was interesting because if you're completely bombing on stage, nobody will tell you. Nobody will tell you like, oh, that was shit. Everybody will tell you like, yeah, it was good, like they're going, yeah, it's good. It's not nothing. Good job, right? So like something like that, but not really like, oh my God, more like, yeah, good job, And yeah, it's very hard for people. And I understand. I've also seen other CEOs completely bomb on stage because they were clearly not prepared. They kind of just signed up for it. And then they had so many calls that they did not prepare a lot for this particular speech. And then that happened. But yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yep.
So going back to that point now, so how can you find the correct balance, do you feel like, for anything that you write in that sense?
So this is where it's very difficult to prove things in a scientific way. Right? Maybe somebody could study this and compare 1,000 talks with some AI tool and say, this is like the magic thing. The rule I use for myself is 2 minutes per content type, maximum. So if you have an idea, a new idea, like something about PLG that people are thinking about incorrectly, you say the idea, ideally in a sticky way. You write a one-liner that's very punchy and memorable and tweetable. You do that sort of thing, right? You say that idea and you unpack it, and you got to be done unpacking it within 90 seconds to 2 minutes, absolute max.
No.
Then you have to go to something else that helps drive that idea home. You're not changing topics, but you're changing content types. So you go to an analogy for that idea, or a story that shows that idea, or a framework that unpacks that idea. And then when you get to that next piece, you're on that piece, 2 minutes max before you change up the content type again. Now you're still building out one point, and you can swing this the wrong way where you're changing points every 2 minutes. That's not the idea. But within driving a point home, you have to change up the content type 2 minutes max on each content type. That's what I teach my clients. That's what I do myself as well. And it's generally fairly easy to plan for in your deck or notes or whatever.
So when we're talking about the notes and the deck, right? So like the overall structure, is this something where you feel like, let's say you have a 30-minute talk. I think the way that I'm writing stuff is that I write down my bigger points first and then I kind of fill them. And then they're too big and then I kind of shorten them down again to be to fit into my speaking slot, which not always works. So that is one of the weaknesses that I have sometimes. Or do you feel like it's better to kind of come up with individual points and then you line up that many that you are filling the time? Like here's a 2 minute, another 4 2 minute, another 4 2 minute, until we are at the 20 minutes that we have for the speaking.
Yeah, the order of creation for me is always, what are the 1 to 3 high value ideas that you're going to get out? Because if you have more than 3, they're not going to remember any of them anyway. So my perspective is find those few ideas, get them on paper, and construct everything to support those 3 ideas from the very top to the very back. Do you do this? Do you, as I was giving you that spectrum of abstract concept, analogies, stories, tactics, examples, do you do it that way or no? Have you ever thought about it before in terms of like the types of content you're using to build out a point?
No, but I don't think that I need a framework in it. I mean, I may be doing it in terms of like more subconscious in the sense of like, hey, here's what constitutes a good story because I feel like I have a good feeling for that. But it is not, it is less of a rational kind of framework. It's more like, hey, this feels good. And I've been doing it so much that I kind of have the experience to kind of do it on the go,
Yep.
which is a really cool skill to have, I feel like. And I'm not saying that I'm the best, of course. And I also do think that if I do not prepare at all for a talk, then it's, the quality also for me goes down, of course.
Yep.
But I think, I think I can just like, I can come up with a lot of bullshit out of nothing, to be honest, as long as I want to drive like a very specific idea home. Now, to your point that you cannot do, like, I think it's a very good point that you should not describe more than 3 ideas. Because in our head, we're like, oh my God, this is too basic. I think I need to add more stuff and I need more stuff. You have to remember that for people who are hearing something for the very first time, they need to also process the stuff.
Yep.
While you are talking about it and then compare it with existing experiences and so forth. So what that means usually is that you need to give them room to breathe. And you can do that not by taking breaks, so you're not just like stopping to speak for 5 minutes, but if you repeat the same concept over again, it becomes like a repetition. It's almost like, oh, I'm learning a new word.
Yep.
And people, I think, overestimate highly how much people can retain and also process. Even in like I've spoken today again to some founders with a fantastic product, but they've never done product-led growth. And a lot of the things that I talk about to me are very basic, like take a specific differentiator, put it into a freemium, that kind of stuff. For them, this was completely new information. These were not beginners. These are very, very seasoned sales professionals who've worked at a very big scale. And this is why I'm thinking that if you really want to talk about something new, make sure that it can shine and give it repetition. So I think what you said is exactly true.
Yep.
Yeah.
Did you give them an analogy today?
I love giving analogies.
What was your analogy for the like process of like freemium, first paid, whatever it was?
I always give metaphors that we all like understand. So for instance, a lot of companies make the mistake that they're putting stuff into a freemium that is not indicative of the full experience. And we know how that feels if we would go to a restaurant that is specialized in something, right? So I always bring this example of a Chinese specialty restaurant. So, like, oh, there's a restaurant, like the Peking duck or whatever it's called, and they have this really special food. If now this restaurant is handing out, like appetizers that have nothing to do with the full plate that you're getting, then it feels stupid, right? Like, I mean, why would you hand out water just because it's free?
Yep.
When you want to attract people who pay for Chinese specialty food.
That's great.
But companies are doing this all the time, right? So pulling it kind of back into real life metaphors is very powerful. And you have to simplify on stage. Yeah.
I love that. What you just described is one of my big like soapboxes. I think you are, and maybe this is obvious because you do this all the time and it's like part of your career, but it is rare to find conference speakers in the tech world who are doing that at the amount that I would say you need to keep the light bulbs going off. To me, anytime you've got a new idea or just an idea you're trying to get across, it should come paired with something like that restaurant thing.
Yeah.
Because that's actually what makes it stick in people's minds far more than a beautiful graphic, far more than a memorable way to say it is the actual analogy for the idea. That's what makes people actually start behaving and doing things differently. They'll remember the restaurant, they'll forget everything else, but they'll remember that restaurant thing.
So there's a name for this actually. So I learned this when I was getting into Japanese, and it's called mnemonics. So the way that you write it is like M-N-E-M, and then the rest as you would say. So like mnemonics. So the problem is when you hear for the first time a complex idea that is completely foreign to you or new, like for instance, a kanji, like a sign of a language that you've never seen before, then you can try to memorize it, right? But like things like memorizing new stuff like this is extremely hard if you kind of connect it to something else that you already know. But by connecting complex frameworks to already existing solutions experiences that we already have, it becomes much easier. So you're absolutely right. You might not be able to recall what I exactly said, but by remembering the restaurant metaphor, you can then kind of construct again what I said and then be like, that's what she meant, right? So she said like, because they're doing this in the restaurant as well, we should also not doing it. So in the B2B context, it's also about highlighting what you have as a full experience. And I think mnemonics are basically attaching a story to something really abstract that you're familiar with. So for the Japanese language, it would be like, hey, this sign looks like a little dog carrying something around. And then you can, okay, this is the little dog and it means this and that, right?
Yep. Totally.
Very powerful.
Very powerful. Yeah.
So like, let's say you have someone that is coming to you and you're talking about like, like a more, I think, structured approach, because I'm not the best one in also teaching this, because a lot of this stuff also comes natural to me, which I feel like is quite dangerous, because I don't think I would be a good speech coach, because I don't know how to kind of teach a lot of these things.
Yeah.
Do you have any hacks or things that you feel like usually work for people? Like, let's say someone is getting nervous anyways, or like, hey, here's a couple of things that you should always do in preparation, or anything that might not be that obvious?
Yeah, maybe nothing brand new more than what we've already said. I can answer that a little more directly in a second, but the main drum I'm always beating is just if you are feeling nervous, go back to the content before you do anything else to manage that anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because there's so many public speaking coaches who are like, here are the breathing techniques you can do to lower anxiety. Here are the mantras you can say to yourself. Here's like this meditation technique to lower your anxiety before you go on stage. I'm like, that stuff's all fine if you sort of get the foundational stuff in place. If the talk is good, if it's written in an engaging way, if it's clear in your mind, then maybe try some of that stuff. But most people are trying to manage their anxiety without actually figuring out how to write a great talk. So I say, write a great talk, and so much of it takes care of itself. If you get to that point and you're still nervous, a couple things that I tell people, and this is like assuming you've practiced and everything, like in the moment walking up on stage. And I'm not the first person to say this sort of thing, but these are some of the things I use for myself and I tell clients as well. One is try to imagine that you are talking to a friend one-on-one. Try to imagine that you're talking to somebody who you care about, who sort of fits this target goal of the talk, and just get up there and say, I'm here to help one person in this room, and I'm going to pretend I'm off stage just helping somebody. That can be very powerful to try to get your mind out of performance mode and into just like serving mode. Like, I'm here to serve this group of people. Another thing you can do is just to say, it's okay if I'm nervous, right? Because you get nervous and then you get nervous about being nervous. And the more you're nervous about being nervous, it just becomes a downward spiral. So sometimes you can kind of stop the spiral by saying, sometimes speakers are nervous and nobody dies. The audience doesn't die, right? I don't die. They don't die. No one's going to come hunt me down with a machete afterward and kill me because they could tell I was nervous on stage. And if the ideas are really powerful, what'd you say?
I hope not. Yeah, go on.
You hope not. You never know, but you hope not. To say, if you've really tested the ideas, this is still going to be able to help people, even if I am a little nervous, right? It's okay to be nervous. And then if you need to go there, you can say, it's okay if I bomb, right? It's okay if this is horrible. Not that that's the goal. But again, if you've done all the work, sort of just embracing the worst case scenario in your own mind can sometimes lower the stress a little bit.
I think this is exactly right. I learned this in the context of performance sports a little bit, because there you also have the real implication that when you do start to get nervous, you start to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore you also become more nervous and so forth. And a good kind of thing, I was talking about this with someone else also on the podcast relatively recently, was like this concept of when you have to perform on a very specific, like on a given date, and let's say you cannot just cancel it anymore because it is a stage talk that has been arranged, or like it's an important all hands or whatever, there are always two types of thoughts in how you see the situation and actions that you can do. And they can either be helpful or they can be unhelpful. So for instance, an unhelpful thing to say is that, oh my God, I'm going to bomb. I'm totally nervous. This is the worst thing that I've ever been in. And then an unhelpful action would be is that, like, until I go, like, I hope I just die right now, right? Like, I don't want to go on stage and I'm just going to suffer through this right now. So it doesn't matter whether it's true or not, because that's a different kind of topic as well. But like, they're both unhelpful. So like, the analysis is unhelpful because it doesn't help you to perform, because the goal is to perform.
Yep.
And the action is also unhelpful. So the next best thing is to have a helpful assessment, but an unhelpful action. A helpful assessment would be like, yeah, I'm nervous, I'm on stage, but that's normal, right? That is normal for a speaker to be a little bit nervous because there's a lot of it hanging into it. But then you say like, oh, but now I'm going to just suffer through. That's an unhelpful action. So a helpful thing there would be to just say like, trying to ground myself. Let's just take like, I'm just going to try to nail the next minute. And then I take the next minute and so forth, right? So like, how can I ground myself? Maybe I'm just going to breathe on stage as well. I mean, to be honest, I also seen this happen. And it also happened to me at some point where I just had to say like, guys, I just need like 5 seconds. And it just, I know it's uncomfortable to say that in front of an audience.
You would say that on stage?
I would do that.
Because you were nervous?
Yeah, I think that happened. I mean, it was at the beginning
Yeah.
when I wasn't doing it that much, but I was like, yeah, and I was also honest. I think like sometimes you can also be vulnerable. I think honestly, you can also like, don't take yourself too serious. I think that's another mistake that people do. Like, just be like, hey guys, I'm really nervous, but I'm super happy to be here. Both of these can be true.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's totally fine.
Yep. I agree with everything you said. I think people do not expect you to be perfect. And when they can tell you're a human being speaking on stage, there's nothing wrong with that. I see this with a lot of clients where they're like, I am planning on walking up and telling everybody this is my first time and I'm nervous. And I'm like, don't do that if you don't have to do that. Because then everyone can start caring more about you than your content because they feel the empathy, right? I think it can be helpful if it's obvious you are kind of nervous, then you can just name it and then everybody's anxiety goes down. But if you lead with that, now that's how you're framing the talk.
That's true.
I'm only saying that because so many of my clients like instinctually want to do that. And I'm like, don't do that if you don't have to do it. But yeah, if you make a mistake or if you forget a slide or you say something that doesn't make sense, you can just be like, I forgot a slide, or that didn't really make sense, or let me explain that again. And
yeah, you can make a lot of fun about yourself also on stage for sure. I think that is true. And I think another good thing to like that is important to remember is if you're a CEO or a founder or like a product manager that has been just schlepped to one of these events where you have to give a presentation. I think unless you are a professional doing this day in and day out on stage, then you don't have to perform like someone that does it day in and day out, right? It's good if you practice them. This is coming back to your original point. If you've put in the work, then you have the maximum going for you anyways. And if you're not a professional stage speaker, then you also don't have to perform like one. So that's the great thing, right? Like they're not coming to watch a performance of a rock star.
Yes, I tell a similar, because along those lines, when people start to feel the pressure to be like a polished public speaker, but they've never done it before, sometimes they flip into like high school theater mode or like valedictorian mode, and they'll be like, good afternoon, everyone. I am so happy. And like they saw some like reel on LinkedIn that was like, how to use your hands while you're on stage. And they're trying to do all these things. And I'm like, do not touch any of that performance stuff until you are like 50 talks deep. You know what I mean? Just get up there and be yourself. There's that Vin dude who's like really a big public speaking coach. And he's like, use your voice like an instrument and go, bring your energy up and then bring it down. Have you seen that guy?
Yeah, I think I do. Yeah, I think I know what you mean.
And I'm like, dude, you are so right if you are talking to like people that have done 100 talks. But the average exec starting their speaking journey should not be paying attention to like, am I varying my pitch enough in this session? You know what I mean? Like, that's just psycho to me. I do some of that stuff now because I'm on talk like 600 or something, but that would have gotten me so in my head for the first year or two.
I think that's a very good point, because now that you're talking about it, I'm also realizing that the number one thing that you should consider or like concern yourself with, if you have the attention span to just worry about one thing, then it should be about delivering the content. Anything else that comes afterwards is bonus. But if you try to make that like the major thing, then your other stuff will start to fail. I think I told you this also last time on the interview, and I think I'm going to tell the story again. I had one of these devices on my back that made me stand up right? So I cannot remember the name of it right now on stage. And it was reminding me to stand up on stage because this is a feedback that I got. Look at I'm slumped and,
So distracting.
Exactly. And it was so distracting that I was standing straight, but I was constantly getting out of my talk. So, get your priorities right. And I think what you just said is very true. Focus on what matters.
I literally tell them, do not think of this as a performance.
Yeah.
Think of this as in like you're arguing, like you're trying to persuade. It's not performance, it's persuasion. Like a lawyer doesn't say, what am I going to do with my hands? A lawyer is focused on argument. Like you're a lawyer, you're not a, actor.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the restaurant again, right? As long as the food tastes good, the presentation can be a little bit off, but it cannot be the other way around.
Yep.
That's just what it is. So what else is there to say?
I know we're probably wrapping up, but I'd love to hear your take, and I can maybe share all these too, on hooking people at the beginning. Because I think this is another big place people mess up.
Yeah.
Is the intro section.
So funnily, I do not introduce myself at all in the beginning. I don't do that anymore. I have not done this in a long time because I feel like telling people who you are before they know what you do is not interesting at all.
What's your hook now? What's your framework for a hook?
So the most important thing is that it is not my personality, right? I'm not going to tell them for 5 minutes, this is the worst thing that you can do. Like, why am I on stage? And then I worked for Lotus Notes in 1998, and then I did this and that. Fuck off. I don't want to hear about it. So don't do an intro of yourself. And if you have to do one, then it should be really, really short. You can just like, hey, my name is Leah. I talk about B2B, product-led growth, and I want to tell you more about this today. You can. But this is equivalent to having someone having a YouTube video where they explain to you for 10 minutes, hi, welcome to my video. Thank you very much for coming. And you're just like, get to the fucking point, man. Right? So the hook is you want to make a statement that is sort of, I don't want to say clickbaity. That's not what I mean. But like you need to say something that is believable if there is data following afterwards. So for instance, you could say that AI is making go-to-market extremely difficult, but also it changes the jobs of product managers fundamentally. There's no reasoning in that particular statement. Like I did not say why this is the case or what the data is for it or whatever, but the point of the presentation is to kind of prove these 2 points. And I will reference them constantly over the talk. So rather than building up to your kind of argument, you already kind of spill the beans in the beginning. It's almost like, hey, like here's a murder movie. And it starts with, and the gardener killed the Baroness, right? Like that's the first sentence. Let me show you how it happened, right? And I feel like on stage, when you're trying to present an idea, that is what you're doing. You're not solving a murder mystery and then the big woof is coming at the end. It's more about, let me tell you how it looks like at the end. And then I'm explaining to you how I got there. And I feel like that is usually a quite foolproof strategy. Like, keep it simple, keep the ideas simple, keep complex ideas also simple. I always spend like 5 to 10 minutes, maybe more 5 minutes to explain terms in the way that I talk about them. The joke about 3 people that get together and talk about God. And those are 3 different deities, right? Because everybody thinks they're talking about the same thing, but they're not.
Yep.
That is specifically in tech where we have a lot of jargonism. It's very important to kind of establish that we're talking about the same thing. And then the other thing is just like, I don't take myself that serious. So I'm starting like with my grandeur. I'm coming in with my executive slides and then I make jokes about it. Like, look at me. I must be important because I have a pyramid slide. That is always landing really well with people. And I think it also gives you some credit, like with the audience in general, because you're not coming off that kind of serious. But I feel like the hook is your presentation in a way, right? It needs to be something. My presentation is never about Gary the sales guy. That is not a presentation.
Right.
Gary the sales guy is a tool to kind of explain what product-led growth is and why it is so difficult to kind of integrate product-led growth into a sales-led organization. But that sounds very dry. But with Gary, it's fun because everybody knows a Gary.
Yeah.
And it becomes relatable,
Yep.
Not sure whether that's a good framework. See, I don't think it's a good framework that you can follow, but I think that's how I'm doing it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think there's similarity to that to what I encourage people to do. A lot of the stuff I loved you were saying, one is not doing the whole resume, your whole bio. I always talk people out of that. Another common mistake on that end of like giving too much context is when you give them like the table of contents of your talk. I'm going to talk about this, and then I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to talk about this. I'm like, no. That's too much. You're already boring people. On the other end, and I don't think you're saying this, but sometimes people will have watched a couple TED Talks and they will go, oh, I've learned a thing or two about public speaking.
Right.
And then they'll apply some of that stuff and they'll walk up on stage and they'll be like, I'll never forget July 10th, 2025, when I was walking home, and they'll launch straight into a story. You know what I'm talking about? With like no context.
It was a warm summer day, and my left ass cheek was twitching. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I'm like, they think that's like a good intro because it's really attention grabbing. And I'm like, it is attention grabbing. People are listening, but they don't know why they're listening. And it's very theatrical. It's very like silly feeling, but a ton of people do that. And I don't tell them not to do that. The framework I love is 3 Ps: pain points, problem, promise. So pain point has to be a negative thing they already feel. So this is where all you're trying to do is get everybody nodding their head. So I had like one client who is in UXR, UX research. You familiar with this?
Mm-hmm.
So like he is speaking to a room full of UXR people on how to present better to their stakeholders. It's a little meta. It's like a presentation on presentations, right? But his whole presentation was on how to like captivate your stakeholders and give better presentations. He didn't start by saying, you guys all suck at presenting, right? Because that's the problem, but that's not the pain point they feel.
Yeah.
They think they're great. So he starts with the pain point that they do feel. And I always encourage people to go, no matter how technical the environment, go as human as you can in the first 60 seconds.
Yeah.
So he started by saying, it is one of the worst feelings, and we all feel it regularly, to feel like you put a ton of work into something and nobody cares and nobody listens. And you put hours into this, the research and the presentation, you feel like it just gets overlooked. Very human, very pain points, very empathy and rapport building, right? So that'd be something maybe you could noodle on. Is like, okay, even if they like the idea, have I gotten into a pain point that affects them on a human level? Because if you can get them there, you've got them. You've got them for 40 minutes. You've got them for an hour. Because if it's a personal pain point, not just an interesting idea, they'll love you forever. And they'll be like, Leah is my mom. So pain point. And then the deeper problem that your talk is actually going to solve. Because you're not actually going to give them a counseling session on like, let me help you feel better that no one listens to you. So his next thing, and this is sort of the sticky statement part, he said, we don't have a research problem. We have a presentation problem.
Mm.
Now, the one thing I would maybe push back on that you said a little bit is he does not give away the solution in the intro. I think you're trying to create tension. You're trying to say somebody died, but we don't know who did it. But I'm going to tell you who did it. You don't want to give it away all up front. You want to say, here's the problem we're going to solve for the next 35 minutes. That's what I recommend, right? So he says,
that's fair.
Yeah, we don't have a research problem. We have a presentation problem. So pain point, we all don't like not getting listened to. Problem, we have to get better at presenting. And then the promise, I'm going to take you through a process to get better at this. And this is where you can have another sort of mini hook. So for him, he used to be a detective, like law enforcement, and he applied all he learned as a detective to UX research. So he's researching crimes, and he applied the same things to researching, customer or, like users of an app or whatever. So in that promise, you can give a little extra spice of like the angle you're going to take as you give them the solution to the problem. It's kind of like symptom, diagnosis, medicine. The symptom they feel, the diagnosis they may not know, and then here's the medicine that's coming your way, and it's going to taste good.
Yeah, that's true. I guess that's a good point. And I think, in order to conclude on a talk as well, I think you should still find some kind of ways to reinforce it at the end and kind of do a summary that it is kind of containing at least, again, like the full story in an even more abbreviated format.
Yeah.
That's maybe the only thing that I suck at a little bit because I sometimes run out of time.
Yeah.
Despite all the preparation, but like that can also happen. So
yeah. I think the best close is a story of somebody else who applied everything you just taught them. Tell the story of somebody who ran the play you just taught them and the difference it made. Because then it's fully cemented and you get to end with a story and everybody loves the story.
Well, isn't that wonderful? This is how we get to have people to love us. By performing nice on stage. And I think that's a wonderful thing. No, I love stage talking, and I think it's I don't want to call it a hobby, but I think it's an interesting interest to have on the side to kind of manage and master as well.
100%.
Well, Vincent, thank you very much for coming today and spilling all these beans. How should people get in touch with you? You almost have the entire world following you on LinkedIn, but in case someone doesn't, they can follow you on LinkedIn. Is there any other place where they should go to, or do you want to hear from people?
I do not really care. No, I'm just kidding. I love to. I'd love to hear from anybody. Anybody. I'm around. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm low tech. I got no email as subscribers. I got no Instagram. I got no Substack. I got no website. I got LinkedIn.
What a boomer. Maybe you should do that. Maybe you should go on Lovable and just like vibe code one of your websites.
Well, it's actually a good idea.
No, but you have a website. It's called your LinkedIn profile, and that works.
That is it. I got to keep things very streamlined with still having a day job. So I'm just simple. LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm there.
Well, I'm going to be excited to see where you're going to end up in the next year or two. Maybe you're going to expand to other planets. But until then, I'm really glad that we've spoken. And yeah, that's that for this episode.
Thank you so much for having me. Truly so grateful.
Kaboom. Thank you so much for listening to The Producty with Leah. If you don't have enough yet, you can subscribe to my podcast right now at Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or you can head to my website, leahtarin.com, which is leahtarin.com, where you can find much more of my material or just want to work with me.